1 minute ago it was supposed to be simple. A quiet meeting. A careful handshake. A moment the palace could call progress. But then the air changed. A corridor tightened. And Princess Anne stepped forward like a locked door given a heartbeat. Harry expected a pathway. He got a boundary. Not shouted. Not argued. Just enforced. And when William silently backs her, the message becomes brutal. This isn't a family moment anymore, it's an institutional decision. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. In this story's world, the palace doesn't panic the way the public imagines. It doesn't explode. It compresses. Aides move faster, but quieter. Phones buzz where phones shouldn't buzz. Whispers travel in fragments, half sentences, coded names, quick warnings slipped between polite smiles. 1 minute ago isn't just a timestamp, it's a state of emergency wrapped in etiquette. The building becomes a living organism trying to protect its most fragile organ, the future. Because the children are not just children here. They are continuity made human. They are image, inheritance, and the promise that the monarchy still has a next chapter. That's why access to them is never casual, never spontaneous, never just family. Every moment near them carries weight. Who was allowed? Who was seen? What could be repeated later? What could be turned into a photo, a quote, a narrative? In a palace addicted to control, a simple meeting can become a weapon if it happens at the wrong time, under the wrong conditions, with the wrong witness watching. And Anne understands that better than almost anyone. Her posture is calm, immovable, duty-driven, no theatrics, no performance, no emotional escalation. She doesn't need to be dramatic, because the boundary itself is dramatic enough. In that corridor, she becomes the institution's spine, a reminder that permission exists, and permission can be withdrawn. The refusal lands like a locked gate, polite on the surface, absolute underneath. The kind of no you can't negotiate with because it isn't personal. It's procedural. And when something becomes procedural, it means the decision was made before the conversation even began. Harry's shock is immediate, and it hits harder because it happens in private. Public conflicts can be spun. Public statements can be softened, but private denial is raw. It tells you what the palace truly believes about you when there are no cameras to impress. In this story's world, Harry walks into that corridor expecting at least a chance, at least a pathway, even if it's cautious. Instead, he meets a boundary that feels like exile, and the humiliation burns because it's delivered with calm, not anger. Calm makes it feel final. Then William backs her quietly, decisively. Not with a speech, not with a public declaration, with silence that functions like authority. A glance that says, "This is not up for discussion." A posture that turns Anne's boundary into policy. In a monarchy, the person who controls access controls reality, and William's backing changes the entire meaning of the moment. This isn't Anne acting alone. This is the future of the crown aligning its defenses. That alignment is what makes the refusal feel brutal, because it signals unity against one figure standing outside the circle. And that's when the trigger begins to surface beneath the etiquette. A crossed line. Something tied to trust, conditions or prior breaches something the palace has not forgiven, something it has only managed. Maybe promises were made and broken. Maybe rules were tested behind closed doors. Maybe the palace believes a private meeting could become a public lever, and it refuses to offer leverage again. The details stay unspoken in the corridor, but the tension announces them anyway. The boundary isn't created out of thin air. It's built on a history the palace doesn't want to relive. The real cliffhanger is that someone is watching. Not a gawking bystander, an insider, positioned just far enough to look uninvolved, close enough to capture everything. Their phone is already in hand. Their fingers are already moving. Because in this world, the first person to write the story often controls the story. And the moment a witness starts texting, the corridor becomes more than a corridor. It becomes a headline forming in real time, one that can either protect the children or ignite a new war around them. And before anyone can smooth it over, one question ignites behind palace walls: what happened that made Anne decide Harry couldn't be near them? Adults can recover from scandal. Children become the symbol of it. In this story, the palace doesn't fear a tense conversation, it fears a photo, a quote, a moment that can't be undone. Because once the children are involved, the narrative hardens. That's why just a meeting becomes the most guarded event in the building. And that's why Anne's no isn't personal, it's protective. In this world, access to the children isn't simply access to family, it's access to legacy and image. A single moment with them can be turned into proof of closeness, proof of reconciliation, proof of authority, or proof of division, depending on who tells the story first. The palace knows that one gesture can define months of headlines. One smile can be edited into a truce. One awkward pause can be marketed as rejection. And once the children are placed at the center of the narrative, adults stop being adults. They become strategists. They become storytellers. They become people willing to pull innocence into a fight, because innocence is the cleanest currency for public sympathy. That's why the palace guards routines like state secrets. Location privacy. Predictability. The silent rhythm of where the children are, when they move, who is near them, who is allowed to be seen in their orbit. This isn't paranoia for sport, it's survival for an institution that understands the modern world. The wrong detail shared at the wrong time doesn't just create gossip, it creates risk. And risk isn't only physical, it's reputational, it's political. It's the kind of risk that makes the palace tighten and make choices that look cruel from the outside but feel necessary from the inside. The emotional tension is brutal because children don't understand leverage, but adults do. In this story's world, the palace has already learned what happens when boundaries are treated casually. A prior line was broken quietly, nothing dramatic, nothing public, just a subtle breach that left a scar. A promise made in private that later became something else in public. A detail shared in confidence that later appeared in a narrative dressed as truth. The palace doesn't need a huge betrayal to lose trust. It only needs proof that trust can be converted into content. And once that proof exists, the gate closes. William's instinct, future-focused and unforgiving, is built on that lesson. Protect the line of succession symbolically and practically. Protect the children not just from danger, but from becoming props in a battle adults refuse to end. That's why Anne's refusal finds support. Because when the future is at stake, the palace will always choose control over comfort. It will always choose structure over emotion. It will always choose the option that keeps tomorrow stable, even if it makes today unbearable. And Anne is the person who makes that choice look simple. Anne doesn't negotiate with chaos. She contains it. In this story's world, she has watched the family bleed through 1,000 cuts, leaks, interviews, betrayals, public wars dressed as truth-telling. So when she steps in, it isn't drama, it's diagnosis. She treats reputation like security, and security like survival. And for the first time, she applies that mindset to Harry coldly, finally, without apology. Anne's reputation has never been built on softness. It's been built on discipline, blunt, controlled, loyal to the institution over feelings. Her emotional stake is not a grudge, it's the monarchy's future. She sees patterns others try to ignore, permission creep that starts small and ends with entitlement. Boundary testing disguised as reconciliation, narrative manipulation disguised as healing. In this story's world, she doesn't trust private promises anymore, because private promises have a habit of becoming public weapons once the story benefits from it. And she has information, something discovered recently, that hardens her into steel. not a rumor she overheard at a dinner, but a detail that confirms her fear. Someone has been probing the palace's edges, testing access points, looking for openings. Maybe it's about routines. Maybe it's about how quickly a private moment becomes a public narrative. Maybe it's about how a single photograph could reshape the balance of sympathy overnight. Whatever it is, Anne's posture says she is no longer guessing. She is acting on certainty. Her stance also implies something even more unsettling. She doesn't trust certain gatekeepers either. Because if access can be granted too easily, it means someone inside is willing to bend rules for convenience, optics, or pressure. And Anne is done with bending. That's what makes her refusal feel final. She isn't punishing Harry for old wounds in this story's world. She's containing a risk that the palace has already priced, already calculated, already decided it cannot afford again. But protection has a cost, and in this palace, the cost is always paid in relationships. And the colder Anne becomes, the clearer it is this refusal isn't about love. It's about risk. Harry doesn't hear no as protection. He hears it as exile. In this story, the denial hits a nerve that's been exposed for years. You're welcome as a headline, but not as family. He thinks he's being punished through the children, made to feel powerless in the one place he still wants to matter. And when that feeling mixes with anger, the palace becomes a tinderbox, because hurt people don't just react, they remember. The reaction isn't loud at first. It's the kind of shock that tightens the face before it finds words. Rejection, humiliation, desperation, each one arrives like a wave that's been waiting behind his ribs. He tells himself this was meant to be a step forward, something careful and human, and yet he's being met like a threat. And in this world, that is what breaks him open, not the refusal itself, but the cold certainty behind it. The fact that the no didn't sound like a debate. It sounded like a verdict delivered in advance. Harry's argument, when it finally comes, isn't framed as entitlement. It's framed as reconciliation. He pushes the idea that healing needs access, not walls. That you can't rebuild trust while someone keeps tightening the gate. That if the palace truly wants peace, it has to allow a moment that looks like family, not like security protocol. But the palace hears something different. The palace hears pressure. The palace hears urgency that can be weaponized. The palace hears a man trying to force a moment that can't be undone once it happens. And in a monarchy addicted to control, anything irreversible is treated like danger. That's where the central collision happens. Harry sees closeness as a right that proves repair, while the palace sees closeness as a privilege that must be earned, measured, and managed. He speaks like someone pleading for humanity. They respond like an institution defending a perimeter. A private plea collides with a public history, and the public history always weighs more in rooms like this because it comes with receipts, scars, and memories that don't fade just because the tone is softer today. Then Harry reaches for something he believes should settle it. A past promise, a quiet assurance from another time, an understanding that when the time is right, there would be moments, there would be access, there would be a way back in. He references it like a key. But the palace doesn't respond like people who recognize a key. It responds like people who know the key doesn't exist on paper. And in this world, if it isn't on paper, it didn't happen. Or worse, if it happened, someone wants it deniable. The gap between Harry's memory and the palace's protocol becomes another wound, because it tells him the truth he dreads. Even kindness can be reversed if it was never formal. The tension spikes sharply when Harry pushes again, not with violence, but with emotion that refuses to stay quiet. That's when the palace's fear ignites. Emotion is messy. Emotion leaks. Emotion can become a story, and stories are what the palace spends its life trying to control. Somewhere nearby, a device captures a fragment of the exchange, just a few seconds, just enough to strip context and amplify tone. The kind of recording that can become anything in the wrong hands. A plea turned into demand. A denial turned into cruelty. A private moment turned into public war. And as Harry pushes back, The palace makes its most dangerous move. It calls William. William doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't have to. In this story, his power shows up as silence, one look, one nod, one refusal to over-explain. When he backs Anne, he turns a boundary into a policy. Not forever, not officially, but effectively. Because in royal life, the person who controls access controls reality, and William is done letting reality drift. His motivation isn't presented as punishment. It's presented as protection. Protect the children. Protect Catherine. Protect the future. He frames it as stability, not revenge. Because stability is the only justification the institution will always defend. He doesn't argue in the corridor. He tightens channels. He narrows the circle of decision-making until permission becomes a single controlled stream rather than a family debate. Fewer voices. Tighter oversight. A boundary that no longer depends on emotion to hold. It depends on procedure. Factions react instantly, even if they pretend they don't. Some quietly cheer because they believe firmness is the only language chaos understands. Others fear the optics because a hard boundary looks cold, and cold is easy to criticize. But the message is unmistakable. Anne and William align, creating a unified front that turns a family moment into institutional policy. In a palace built on hierarchy, unity at the top is power. And power, once shown, invites retaliation. Because the moment William chooses a side, the question shifts from should Harry meet them to who benefits from stopping him. The public thinks royal conflict happens in headlines. In this story, it happens in whispers, fast, precise, and weaponized. The moment Anne blocks access, a second machine turns on, messaging. Phrases are chosen, motives are assigned, eyewitnesses are managed. Because if Anne and William look justified, someone else looks guilty. So the palace does what it always does, best turns a private moment into a public narrative before truth can settle. It starts almost instantly, like a switch flipped in a room no one is allowed to enter. Aides who didn't witness the corridor somehow speak as if they did. Concern appears in the language, soft, sympathetic words that carry sharp implications. Anne becomes harsh, rigid, unreasonable. William becomes controlling, cold, paranoid. The narrative is built to make protection look like punishment. Because if protection is accepted as the truth, then the palace has to admit it had reason to fear Harry. And that admission would widen the fracture into something too visible to manage. So selective leaks begin. Not full transcripts, not full context, just fragments, details trimmed to tilt sympathy. A line of dialogue stripped of the tone that made it human. A description of raised voices when the real violence was silence. A whisper that the children were used as leverage, carefully planted so the audience forgets who is actually being protected. And the optics trap tightens, defending the boundary starts to look cold, and cold is the easiest emotion for the public to punish. In a family story, warmth wins. In an institutional story, control wins. The palace tries to keep both, and ends up looking guilty either way. Then the mediators arrive. Advisors who speak like they're bringing peace, but peace is never their true product. Their true product is containment. They don't ask who was right, they ask what can be said without making it worse. They don't seek resolution, they seek a version of reality that protects the monarchy from embarrassment. Meetings happen, calls are placed, names are floated as if they are solutions. But every solution has the same goal: make the refusal look mutual, make the boundary look temporary, make the institution look united, even if it's bleeding underneath. Quiet factions form as the whisper network spreads. Loyalists who believe Anne and William are doing what must be done. Sympathizers who feel the cruelty of exclusion and fear what it signals. Opportunists who don't care about truth at all, only about what the moment can be used for. And somewhere inside that web, a darker intention takes shape. Someone plans to use this as leverage against William. If he looks too controlling, he becomes vulnerable to the accusation every institution fears overreach. If he looks too soft, he becomes vulnerable to chaos. Either way, someone is positioning him to lose. And just when the palace thinks it can contain the fallout, a new detail surfaces: the refusal wasn't spontaneous. It was prepared. Here's the twist. Anne didn't decide in the corridor. She decided earlier. In this story, she had a file notes, timestamps, warnings, patterns enough to make her say no without hesitation. And that means the palace didn't react to Harry. It anticipated him. Which raises a brutal possibility. Someone inside knew something was coming and moved first. The file isn't dramatic on the surface. That's what makes it dangerous. It reads like accumulation, behavior patterns, prior boundary issues. Small incidents that never made it into public view because they were handled quietly. Warnings that sound petty until they repeat. Timestamps that align too neatly with certain leaks, certain calls, certain moments when private became public. Anne didn't build it to punish. She built it to track risk, and the fact that it exists suggests the palace has been living with a silent fear for longer than anyone admits. The file also hints at a breach of trust that never reached daylight. Not necessarily one explosive betrayal, something worse, a chain of small breaches that taught the palace a lesson. That private promises can be converted into public narratives. That proximity can be weaponized. That once you give access, you can never fully control how it will be remembered or repeated. William's advisors see the file as justification, the clean reason Anne's no was not emotional. Others see it as escalation. Because once files exist, relationships turn into surveillance and reconciliation turns into compliance. And then the paranoia deepens. The file doesn't just talk about Harry. It hints at a larger leak network, an ecosystem that benefits whenever the palace is forced into dramatic boundaries. The stakes rise because now suspicion spreads beyond the obvious target. The cliffhanger hits when the file includes a name uncomfortably close to William's circle. Not a stranger, not an outsider, someone who could have known when Harry would arrive, what conditions were expected, what pressures would be applied. Suddenly, the story is no longer Harry versus the palace. It's the palace versus its own cracks. Because if Anne's file is real, then the most dangerous possibility isn't that Harry would meet the children. The most dangerous possibility is that someone inside wanted the refusal to happen, wanted the fallout, wanted the narrative war. Because narrative war creates cover for bigger moves. Because once Anne's file exists, the real question becomes, was the palace protecting the children, or protecting itself? There is a moment when a crisis stops being rumor and becomes policy. It isn't loud. It's quiet enough to hear your own heartbeat. A closed-door meeting. A decision made without applause. A phrase like "in the interest of the crown." And once those words are spoken, the palace isn't a household anymore, it's an institution that devours whoever threatens its stability. In this story's world, that meeting doesn't feel like reconciliation. It feels like containment. The corridor refusal has already turned into paperwork, and paperwork is how the palace makes emotions irrelevant. Access rules are formalized with a precision that leaves no room for misunderstanding. Protocols, schedules, witnesses, no exceptions. The children's movements are treated like state logistics. The list of who can be near them becomes a controlled document, not a family choice. And the most chilling part is how calm everyone sounds while they do it, as if calm can cleanse the cruelty of what is being decided. Because once rules exist, reversing them becomes a confession. The stakes become near irreversible. Walking back a boundary looks like weakness, like doubt, like a silent admission that the palace didn't know what it was doing when it drew the line. And the palace cannot afford doubt. Not now. Not with public attention hovering like a spotlight outside every window. So each clause is written as if it will one day be challenged, and each clause is designed to survive that challenge by sounding reasonable, responsible, protective. Faction tension peaks without anyone raising their voice. Pushback arrives wrapped in Unity Optics' soft warnings that the monarchy must look warm, must look human, must look forgiving. Compliance arrives wrapped in Security Logic, the argument that forgiveness is meaningless if risk remains. People choose sides in pauses, in silences, in the way they avoid certain names. Some believe the boundary is necessary to protect the future. Others fear the boundary will become the story itself, a visible fracture that turns family into fortress. And in the middle are the opportunists, listening closely, because policy is power, and power leaves footprints. A last-ditch appeal tries to pull the decision back toward emotion. Not a tantrum, something more dangerous, reason dressed as compassion. Think of the optics. Think of healing. Think of the children's long-term relationships. But the room is no longer thinking in relationships. It's thinking in risk. And then the warning is repeated, almost like a prophecy. You will create enemies you can't see. The sentence hangs because everyone knows it's true. Tightening control pushes resistance into hidden places, and hidden places are where leaks, plots, and counter-narratives are born. Then the cliffhanger arrives like a blade in velvet. New evidence drops mid-meeting. A detail that shifts the weight of suspicion, not loud enough to explode the room, but sharp enough to cut through certainty. It suggests the corridor refusal wasn't just reaction, it was anticipation. It implies someone knew something was coming and positioned the palace to respond in a specific way. And that changes everything, because now the question isn't only is the boundary right, the question becomes who is steering the boundary and why. And when that interruption lands, the room realizes the refusal wasn't the end, it was the opening move of a deeper purge. If you think this ends with a no, you don't understand palace warfare. Winning doesn't bring peace, it brings consequences. Because once Anne proves she can block Harry and William proves he will back her, the institution learns a terrifying truth. Authority is shifting. Some call them protectors, others call them threats. But everyone agrees on one thing: the palace will never trust the same way again. The palace tightens immediately. Fewer trust channels. More surveillance. More control. Conversations shrink. Access becomes rationed. The children's orbit becomes smaller, cleaner, harder to reach. Harry's camp retreats or plots hurt hardening into strategy, silence turning into planning. Because rejection in royal life doesn't end stories, it fuels them. William's camp hardens too, convinced that firmness is the only shield against chaos. Public unity is staged like theatre smiles arranged, statements polished, calm projected. But private unity fractures into suspicion and calculation, and precedent takes root like a shadow. Anyone can be cut off if stability is invoked. The corridor refusal becomes a template, a tool, a method the palace can use again, and that is what terrifies the people who live inside it. Yet the twist teased beneath all this tightening control is the darkest one. The original trigger wasn't the biggest secret. Something else is coming, something tied to roles, visibility, future control. The refusal was the spark, not the fire. And if new evidence exists, then the palace isn't only dealing with family tension, it's dealing with an internal game one where the children are the board, and adults are moving pieces around them. Because after that corridor refusal, one question hangs over the monarchy like a storm cloud. Was this protection, or the first strike of a new royal regime? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.